Welcome to the latest lecture in our series on psychology in preparation for the AP Psychology exam this May. My name is Chris Gall and I wrote today's lecture. It is the second in our series on topic 1.2 from the College Board's AP Psychology course and exam description version 1. It is my strong recommendation that you stop the video as needed to write things down and take notes, or that you rewind as needed if you miss something and need to re-listen to it. As we go throughout today, think back to the previous lecture when we talked about how you can design experiments and think about how this piece fits into the larger puzzle of designing research in a behavioral science like psychology. Our learning target for today, as defined by the College Board, is that you can discuss the value of reliance on operational definitions and measurements in behavioral research. It's also worth noting that this is one of the most important ideas in terms of understanding how experiments actually work and how they can be replicated. So you really do need to make sure that you understand this topic. So without further ado, let's go ahead and dig into it. So operational definitions are how you can identify whether or not a certain behavior or emotion will count for purposes of your study. The technical way to say this is that it's a statement of the procedures that you will use to measure a specific variable. And I stole that definition from a site called onemindtherapy.com. Okay. So this is an essential part of behavioral research because one person's definition is not necessarily the same as another's. When we're talking about most of the other sciences, these definitions are often well established and agreed upon. For example, everyone knows how long an inch is. So when a biologist says that they will measure plant growth and report their results in inches, it is well understood what they mean by an inch. Behavioral sciences are relative newcomers to the scientific game, however, and thus we often lack agreed upon definitions for things. For example, what counts as a smile? Is it the behavior of the mouth, or can the eyes get involved? Does it require vocalization, a laugh, say, or can it be a silent behavior? What is hyperactive behavior in a given scenario? If we're talking about a classroom, for example, is it how often kids leave their seats? How often they talk out of turn? Both? Neither? If we're talking about high school students, should I include checking out by using a cell phone in my definition? Or, because that is not generally disruptive, does it not qualify as hyperactive? If my definition and yours are not the same, we will reach very different conclusions when we study the same group of kids. If you count the cell phone thing and I only count how often kids leave their seats, I will find out a lot fewer hyperactive kids than you will. And this matters when we start talking about the results of a study. So I mentioned on the last slide that it makes a difference in terms of what counts and what doesn't, and that then influences the conclusions that we can draw. In the classroom example, if I'm trying to measure, say, how boring a teacher is, it makes a huge difference in how I determine what boredom looks like. Boredom measured via logging into a cell phone, which many kids use when bored, but which others may use when deeply engaged to do some quick further research on a topic, looks very different than boredom measured via students falling asleep during class, which certainly also occurs when bored, but may occur if a student worked late the night before or stayed up late for some other reason, particularly if the class is early in the morning. The definition of boredom in this case makes a big difference in the results of the study. Not that any of you ever check out during class via cell phones, especially now, right? Or ever fall asleep. Certainly never, ever, never in my class. The point is that a study without a good operational definition is a study that is not replicable and cannot be validated. And like in any other science, if the results of a study cannot be replicated, then they need to be reconsidered and most probably thrown out. Psychology in general suffers from a problem of poor scientific reputation because a great many of the studies cannot be replicated and validated. Having a really good, solid operational definition is one way in which you can help solve the problem of poor study design. So, over the course of today's lecture, we talked about what operational definitions are and why they are important. Operational definitions are the bread and butter of a behavioral scientific study. Operational definitions, at their most basic level, are the criteria that we will use to determine how something counts towards the results in our study. Unlike so-called hard sciences, and I do use that term in quotation marks, behavioral sciences do not have readily agreed upon definitions for how things can be measured. Thus, specifying how we are measuring things is critical in enabling others to replicate our results and to generalize them to different situations. So if you have questions, please do feel free to reach out to me via email and I'd be delighted to answer your questions. Like I said, this is one of the most important ideas in this unit, and so you need to make sure you have a solid working definition of what an operational definition is. Until then, the next time I see you, so long, farewell, auf Wiedersehen, good night, adieu, adieu, to you and you and you.